Coca-Cola CEO James Quincy's heart may have skipped a beat the moment President Trump said current tariffs will go up to 50%. Because even though cans may seem like a mundane detail, they are one of the lifeblood of the company. No one could have predicted at the time how making aluminum imports so expensive could shake the huge global market for cans of Coke, but it certainly sent a chill through Coca-Cola's head office. So, will this trade move really boost the U.S. metal sector, or will it send an icy shock to grocery shelves? We will analyze the details of the latest developments in the world together. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like to be informed about our content. They say some things don't change overnight. Yet, in the early hours of the morning of May 30th, 2025, whispers in the corridors of the White House indicated that a new wave of steel and aluminum tariffs was imminent, a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50% the tariffs. Then, President Donald Trump took the podium to applause at a steel mill in Pittsburgh and said, "We will not build this great country with inferior imported steel. The current tariffs will be doubled to 50%. He accepted the applause with a confident look. At that moment, perhaps no one could have predicted exactly how a soft drink giant would be shaken. But Coca-Cola's top board and CEO, James Quincy, was glued to his chair as soon as he heard that sentence on TV. Because the 50% tariff on aluminum imports, which Trump had targeted, was putting a strain on the supply of aluminum, the basic raw material for Coke cans. There had been tariffs of 25% before, but 50% was a completely different disaster scenario. Coca-Cola is a giant player in the beverage market with operations all over the world. Production in the U.S. still accounts for a huge share of company revenues. In this context, the issue of aluminum imports may seem like a mere detail, but in reality, it is vital. Canned beverages are indispensable for soda consumers in the U.S. market. Moreover, billions of cans of cola are sold in the U.S. every year. A significant portion of the metal components of all of them are supplied from aluminum imports. U.S. domestic aluminum production used to be stronger to meet this demand. But over the last decade, imports have increased and local capacity has been lost to competitors. Now, President Trump is cracking down on imported aluminum in the name of supporting the American metals industry. But the tariffs make the raw material for Coke cans expensive and hard to access. Coca-Cola was also hit hard when tariffs were first raised to 25%. At a press conference in 2023, James Quincy said, "The cost to increase in steel and aluminum will of course be reflected in the cost of cans, the most critical part of our production line. We may have to review prices." At the time, the company implemented a sparing and gradual price hike policy. Some 12-packs saw an average price increase of 3 to 4%. But the 50% tariff announcement is a shock of a different magnitude. As Quincy puts it, 25% is hard to bear, while 50% duty is close to doubling the cost per box. And it's very difficult to plan on such short notice. The public may ask, Coca-Cola is such a giant company, with its production network spread all over the world. Why should it care? But the key point here is that the U.S. market is still one of the biggest revenue generators in the world. Because of cheap labor, some components are imported, partly from Mexico and partly from Asian countries. A very significant portion of can aluminum has long come from countries like Canada and Brazil. There is aluminum production within the U.S., but capacity and price competition are at a level where imports make sense. Now, the 50% tariff undermines this rationality. On the one hand, Coca-Cola is thinking, what if we only sourced from within the U.S.? But it's hard to expect a big increase in domestic aluminum production in the short term. That's why Trump's announcement sent a cold shower through Coca-Cola's head office. The first 25% wave was already a problem, but a 50% barricade could cost 3 to 4 cents extra per can. On a scale of tens of billions of boxes on the market, that's huge. Either we pass this difference on to the consumer, or the company sacrifices profit. Both options have devastating consequences. So, what does Coca-Cola CEO James Quincy say? According to rumors, Quincy has already begun closed-door talks with White House officials. These tariffs are undermining American companies. We talk about protectionism, but how are we going to sustain production when there is not enough aluminum supply domestically? Quincy said behind closed doors. Quincy allegedly asked for some exemptions or quotas. The Trump side, on the other hand, believes that these tariffs are temporary but necessary. Former trade advisor Peter Navarro is quoted as saying, "Tariffs will revitalize the U.S. metals industry. Big companies will be forced to source locally." On the Coca-Cola side, local sourcing is not that easy. Even if aluminum producers in the U.S. operate at full capacity, a demand explosion and raw material shortages are expected in the domestic market. As costs skyrocket, Coca-Cola will eventually have to raise product prices. Considering that a 3 to 4% increase in 2023 caused a backlash, it is not hard to imagine how much consumer protest a 10 to 15% hike would bring. The company does not want to lose the loyal customers, but it is also worried about the perception that canned soft drinks have become a luxury. Could the company's global production network step in? Yes, Coca-Cola has production facilities outside the U.S., but again, the drinks that will be sold in the U.S. will eventually have to be imported into the U.S., so the import phase comes into play. It is inevitable that cans of cola produced in Mexico and transported by trucks and trains to the U.S. will also be subject to a 50% tariff barrier. After all, aluminum is also imported in Mexico. All the production capacity that has to go through import procedures to sell it in the U.S. Some might say, let them use glass bottles or plastic bottles, but Coca-Cola has been emphasizing for years that it can never afford to lose the can market. There is also the environmental pressure of using plastic, and glass is not a complete solution due to transportation costs and fragility. In fact, glass and plastic units are affected by tariffs in completely different ways. Another question is, where does Coca-Cola source its aluminum imports? Customs data shows that Canada is the largest supplier. Secondary suppliers are Brazil and Middle Eastern countries. Now that the tariff standoff between Canada and the U.S. has erupted, it is very likely that aluminum from Canada will be subject to a 50% tariff. Therefore, if imports from Canada are cut, we will open the door to Brazil. But Brazil is also uncertain because Trump says, "I have also scrutinized Brazilian trade practices." So it's a pincer situation. The next solution may be to bring it from the Gulf countries, but there too logistics and freight costs would increase enormously. In short, Quincy and his team have been quoted in the press as saying, "Everywhere we turn, we hit a wall." Coca-Cola is following a strategy of groping through a dark tunnel in this period. Supply, production, pricing are all uncertain. But when Trump's 50% tariff decision comes into effect, there is a high probability that there will be a palpable shock on the beverage shelves. At the same time, Coca-Cola has cut its huge marketing budget. In difficult times, the only way to protect margins is to cut costs, said CFO John Murphy. We will have to scale back R&D, marketing, and sponsorship activities. Anyway, if raw materials are so expensive, no matter how much we advertise, the consumer may not accept a staggering price increase. This whole picture also begs the question, will Coca-Cola join an ag-food coalition? So, in the U.S., agriculture and food lobbies are suffering from trade policies. Farmers are suffering from dairy import restrictions or loss of export markets. The soft drink industry is also struggling with aluminum tariffs. There is talk in Washington that a joint lobbying effort could put pressure on the White House. In particular, senators from states such as Kansas and Iowa are questioning if cans of Coke are missing from the shelves, the reactions will grow. Will Trump back down? Although President Trump said in Pittsburgh, "We will resurrect aluminum and steel with domestic production," Coca-Cola CEO Quincy does not believe these words because new facilities to increase domestic aluminum production would require at least 2 to 3 years and billions of dollars. Even if we try to build it so fast, it will reach full capacity maybe by 2028, 2029. Are we going to live with a 50% tax until then? Politics can change the wind at any moment. Trump could dismiss the issue by saying, "These are the sacrifices imposed by time." Public opinion is dominated by the view that bashing Coca-Cola won't do anyone any good. Many Republican MPs may say in their localities, "Don't bother Coke." Voters will react because Coke, like hamburgers, is seen as part of American culture. But there are also those in the Trump base who say the globalist giants were destroying domestic metal producers, and now they are being put in their place. It may be possible in the future for cans of soft drinks to become profitable if domestic aluminum revives, but what will happen in the intervening years remains unclear. Despite all this uncertainty, Coca-Cola could have immediately said, "We are making Coke 20% more expensive." But Quincy is slow to act, saying hitting the consumer with such a shock all at once could do lasting damage to the brand. While some grocery stores have already started raising the price of a 12-pack by 51 korus, a general national hike is being avoided. But that means the company takes a hit on every can. In an industry that sells billions of cans a year, there is no luxury to absorb a 50% tariff difference from profits. Still, resisting rising costs may be manageable for a while, but it is not known how far the Trump policy will go. In the long run, they are grappling with the question, how long can the boxes last without getting more expensive? The company has launched aggressive campaigns in Latin America and Asia Pacific, focusing on growth outside the U.S. If profit margins are going to fall in the U.S., let's seize the new profit opportunity in foreign markets. This may be a rescue plan of sorts, but the enormous revenues and profits from the U.S. market are still the backbone of the company. Products like zero-calorie colas or juices can be sold in glass or plastic bottles, but the metal can segment is symbolic for the U.S. consumer. At the end of the day, those who say Coca-Cola is a huge company, even a 50% tariff cannot sink it, may be right, but deep damage may remain. If the popularity of the canned drink falls due to cost and price increases, it could lose market share to rival drinks, and competitors like Pepsi face a similar problem. Hence, there is a scenario where the entire carbonated beverage industry will be hit hard. This will be reflected on the Trump administration's own voter base in the form of more expensive cola or less cola. So, will Trump and his team back down? The current signs say no, because they believe that the 50% threshold on metal imports will rapidly revitalize the U.S. metal industry. But the experience of giants like Coca-Cola is that there is no such miracle revival yet. There are only skyrocketing costs. Some Midwestern senators said, "I guess 50% is a negotiating tactic." In reality, it will be reduced to 30–35%. Trump always opens high and negotiates in the middle. In that case, Quincy and his team may be waiting with the strategy of buy time, slow down the big hikes. In any case, in the process, Coca-Cola found itself at the center of the tariff spiral. Everyone is watching with amazement as the trade war over what were thought to be old industries, such as oil or automobiles, has suddenly become so complex that it could strangle the soda giant. Even Coke has a big share in the U.S. economy. It is a cog in the giant wheels. If that core gets jammed, the loss could be huge. As Quincy puts it, opening a Coke with a hamburger at dinner is a ritual for Americans. If it becomes a luxury because of costs, we lose and the consumer loses. Finally, a trade war can upend the supply chain and price of even something as seemingly simple as a can of Coke. Supporting domestic production may sound good, but in a global economy, every policy move can have unexpected and long-lasting knock-on effects. Now, Coca-Cola is in a big dilemma. Do they raise prices or take the loss and stand by? Whatever the case, both are inconvenient. For the consumer, it's time to face the reality that maybe the price of an ice-cold Coke will come out of your side pocket. Everyone is asking, when will the tariffs be relaxed? But Trump's message is, the steelmakers in Pittsburgh are my comrades. I'm not going to lower the 50%. Everyone is keeping their eyes on the White House, and Quincy is waiting anxiously for the costs in the box to heat up the shelves. So, what do you think about this? Let us know what you think in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.